I am so excited to announce that I have released the first official tarot diagnosis spread book. Tarot and Self-Discovery is a therapeutic tarot journey with over 200 spreads, including over 152 card prompts and over 50 robust tarot spreads. You can purchase a physical copy on Amazon or a digital copy at thetarotdiagnosis.com. You are listening to The Tarot Diagnosis. I'm your host, Shannon. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, and I also happen to have a love for tarot. Each episode, I invite you to reflect with me as I work to demystify the tarot and the human experience, all while exploring tarot's connection to mental and emotional health. While this podcast may feel therapeutic, it is not meant to take the place of psychotherapy. So grab your cards and join me as I work to create a pathway to better understand ourselves and those around us. It is impossible to exist at the intersection of tarot and psychology and not run into the concept of the shadow or hear about shadow work. And I've even explored the topic of shadow work several times on the podcast, and it's always an enlightening experience. But I realized there's another component of the shadow that is more of a lesser known version of this part that we don't talk about or don't often explore or maybe even realize that it exists. And that is the golden shadow. If you are familiar with Jung or have just even been on social media, you've heard the term shadow work. And I think it's important to note that Jung didn't create the term shadow work, but he did coin the term the shadow because he theorized that the shadow was a significant aspect or part of our psyche, along with other major psychological archetypes like the anima and animus, persona, and the self. And, as a therapist, a huge portion of the work that I do with clients, I feel like is inherently linked to the concept of the shadow and often mimics shadow work. And so Jung believed that the shadow contained, if we're just talking about the shadow as we know it, that the shadow contained traits and thoughts and beliefs that we hold about ourselves that we want to avoid acknowledging. Because essentially, our shadow represents the parts of our identity that we either consciously or unconsciously distance ourselves from because we perceive these parts to be, negative or bad or undesirable. So the shadow ends up functioning as a container for a repression. While the overarching theme of the shadow and shadow work in general encompasses, what we might consider undesirable traits or characteristics, Jungian analysts and, other Jungian enthusiasts have really gone on to highlight and acknowledge the inherent duality that does exist in the shadow. And they've had started to explore the concept of the golden shadow. And this is something that's been talked about for quite some time, but for some reason, it never really took off. And from a therapeutic perspective, this is interesting because I feel like thinking about the golden shadow is absolutely taking what we would call in the clinical world a strengths-based approach. And really because the golden shadow or strength-based approach to psychotherapy works to acknowledge the positive qualities and traits that we have that maybe we either are pushing away, not giving ourselves the opportunity to explore, or that we might not even realize or identify as positive qualities or strengths. So going back to the term golden shadow, this could encompass qualities or traits like creativity or curiosity, or even our sense of humor. And because this is linked to the shadow, remember, shadows are parts that have been maybe reprimanded, dismissed, or viewed unfavorable by others. So the same can happen for positive traits. So perhaps your sense of curiosity or creativity or maybe even your sense of humor was dismissed or put down or ignored by the people around you who maybe you looked up to or wanted to feel like you belonged with. So this ends up giving us the impression that we should be denying or suppressing these traits or characteristics of ourselves. Because the shadow acts as a container of traits that we believe to be negative, the golden shadow can then function as a container of our repressed authenticity and even our potential, like what we could truly embody and become. Golden shadow work then is equally, if not more important and valuable as any other form of shadow work. I think combining these two together is really what allows us to grow and evolve and become fully integrated or experience individuation, which Jung spoke extensively about. Because when we give ourselves permission to step into the world of our shadow, we're really giving ourselves access to the subconscious, and we're creating a space to understand the roots of our fears, our anxieties, and any sort of unhealthy patterns of behavior or thinking or just ways of existing, either just with ourselves or the world around us. And I think it's easy to say that process can be simultaneously magical, enlightening, and also maybe even a bit formidable. So I'd love to pull a card just to maybe open the dialogue more about this idea of the golden shadow and explore that through the lens of tarot. All right, so I am using the Modern Witch Tarot. I've been really loving this deck and thinking about it a lot lately, so that's what we'll be using. So I'm just going to pull a card to just open up the discussion more on the idea of the golden shadow and just see what tarot brings up, and we can explore how that card might relate to this idea of a golden shadow. All right. Oh, interesting. Okay, so Page of Swords. So I kind of love the Page of Swords as a shadow and also as a golden shadow, because this card is highlighting maybe a younger version of ourselves that was perhaps quite curious. Maybe they asked a lot of questions or had a lot of thoughts and ideas. They were really eager to share. And if we're looking at this through a shadow perspective, then if this is something that maybe you repress, maybe you don't allow yourself to be curious, or you are afraid to ask questions, or you get annoyed with people who do ask a lot of questions, this could be perhaps because a caregiver, teacher, or some other figure of authority in your life maybe reprimanded you for asking too many questions, or maybe you were made to feel dumb or silly for the types of questions that you were asking, either from, someone in authority or even peers. So that means the curious nature of your personality may have then felt like it needed to be repressed in order to keep you safe from any sort of future embarrassment or shame. And then what happens as an adult is you, or, even a teenager and then into adulthood, you might avoid asking questions altogether. You might be someone who feels like you just have to figure everything out on your own, or you don't value or trust the way your brain works. And you might think, oh, I shouldn't ask this question because it's a stupid question, or I should already know the answer to this, so I'm not allowed to ask this question. Or you may even envy the people around you who ask a lot of questions because you feel like that's not something you're allowed to do. This actually brings me to a quote that is pretty famous. Everyone's probably heard this if you're in the world of tarot and psychology or have read any quotes about Jung. He said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." And this is so valuable, especially when we're thinking about shadow work, because often when we are judgmental of others or when we are feeling a negative emotion towards someone, that helps us, it gives us data. It informs us on a multitude of ways. well, what is it that's driving this negative feeling towards this person? Where has this feeling come up before? Where has this behavior from this person that I'm irritated with shown up before in my life? So there's a lot of exploration that can happen there. And what Jung is essentially referring to is this psychological concept of projection, where we project our own unconscious thoughts, feelings, and motivations onto other people. And this is when, we might start to feel resentful that other people are behaving or engaging in, or even just existing in ways that we wish that we could, but maybe feel like we can't, we're not allowed to, or that we've repressed. And again, this goes back to even representing a golden shadow, positive qualities like the inherent curiosity in the Page of Swords. So I kind of want to challenge all of us for a minute. I would love for you to take a moment to just reflect on what qualities or behaviors from others have irritated you or annoyed you lately. Let's think about some behaviors or traits that maybe are not socially acceptable. So I'm talking about, I guess what I'm trying to say is we're going to think about traits that are not socially acceptable. So I'm talking about people who are like rude and vulgar and inconsiderate. We're not going to be thinking about that. I'm thinking about behaviors because we're exploring the golden shadow. So behaviors like creativity, for example, or like the Page of Swords, this level of curiosity and maybe having some ideas that are outside the box. I want you to think about, and we can even think about that through the Page of Swords for a moment. Think about who in your life has been curious lately that has annoyed you. Or we can even think about it through the lens of creativity, or someone who is reveling in their joy. So take a moment to think about the last time that you felt envy towards someone experiencing these emotions or exhibiting this behavior. And think about in what ways you might have felt judgmental towards them. Now, because we're talking about the golden shadow, the reflection that I just wanted you to spend some time with was leaning more towards the kind of conventional type of shadow work that you're probably most familiar with. But I want you to think now also about the last time you admired someone, because this is where our golden shadows are most often easily discoverable in moments of awe and admiration. So think about the last time you said something like, wow, you're so incredible, or I could never do something like that. I could never be you, or I could never do what you're doing. I think it's so cool, or I think that's so exciting, or I wish I could be like that. Or you can even think about the last time you felt as like you had to defer a task to somebody because you felt like they were better equipped than you. And I'm not talking about, someone who's, actually like maybe went to school or has a very specific skill set in something that is not your forte. That's totally different. Because our golden shadow is usually hiding in the places where maybe we are more easily able to praise others, but quick to put ourselves down or deny that those same characteristics or skills or behaviors could actually exist within us. So what's the last compliment you gave someone? And when's the last time you secretly wished you were like someone else? So take a moment to think about the times where maybe you attempted to exhibit that same skill or behavior. What happened? Were you encouraged? Were you put down? Were you validated? Were you invalidated? Now take a moment to reflect on the ways that these same characteristics and qualities might actually exist in you. Now, I almost want to put a disclaimer here because that directive that I just gave can actually be really difficult. And often I will tell people if they're having trouble with this, just make it up. Pretend you're writing a story about yourself for a moment. You do not have to fully embrace this idea yet because this is really hard, especially if you're struggling with issues of self-worth and self-esteem. It can be almost painful sometimes to highlight positive qualities about yourself. Another way to explore the idea of the golden shadow is to think about what you feel like you're supposed to be humble and modest about. Maybe you're afraid you'll look like you're bragging if you talk about an incredible art piece that you've been working on. Or maybe you're scared to let people see your extensive vinyl collection because you don't want them to judge your music preferences. Or maybe you're worried folks will think you're lame if you share the jokes you're thinking about. So, our shadow reflects the parts that maybe we don't want to be. And then the golden shadow reflects parts that we wish we could be. So let's take a moment to shuffle and pull some more cards. I think I want to pull to the question, whichever card comes up, but I want to explore the idea of, what qualities of this archetype might actually exist within us that maybe we try to keep hidden. So that's what we're going to pull to. And if you are listening somewhere where you have a deck nearby, I highly encourage you to grab that and shuffle alongside me and pull a card as well. But if you're listening while you're driving, then you can even think of a card or just think about how the card I'm about to pull might pertain to your own golden shadow. All right. Oh, okay. This almost feels too easy. The Magician. So it's easy, but that's okay. We'll explore, and then maybe I'll pull another card and hopefully we'll be a bit more challenged with the next card. So I love the Magician, and my immediate reaction to this archetype as maybe a golden shadow or the qualities that the Magician inherently exhibits, and that's resourcefulness. So in terms of golden shadows, I wonder if maybe you don't view yourself as someone who is innately capable of getting things done or accomplishing specific tasks. This can happen as a shadow component when maybe growing up we didn't complete tasks the way that people wanted us to. Even though the task got done, it wasn't maybe the right way. So I wonder then what parts of you are actually quite good at accomplishing tasks or are well equipped and resourced. If you spend some time reflecting, you might end up discovering that maybe you're a great list maker, or maybe you have a lengthy Rolodex. Oh my gosh, hopefully everyone knows what that means. Rolodex, oh my gosh, of contacts for when you need help with home repairs. I feel like that's my dad. Like if he needs something done, he's got 20 people he can call. He just knows people. He might not be great at getting home repairs done, but he's really great at calling someone or knowing someone who is. So maybe you're great at delegating tasks or coming up with, and this goes back to the Page of Swords, maybe out of the box solutions to problems. But maybe you're not recognizing these qualities as admirable, especially when we're thinking about, like, for example, like my dad in the Rolodex. Like, he is just someone, he knows so many people. It's wild to me. If you have a problem, it could be anything. He's like, I got a guy for that. So he might not be great at actually solving or fixing something, but he's great at finding someone who is. So you have to kind of like really think outside the box here when we're exploring shadow and the golden shadow, because for that example, it could be really easy for my dad to get down on himself. Oh, I'm not great at fixing all these things. But an admirable quality is the fact that he's been able to build relationships with so many people who are. So let's keep going, because I want a good challenge here. I want tarot to give me something more difficult. And I feel like maybe I kind of glossed over the Magician. Maybe I'm projecting. Maybe I just wasn't super feeling the Magician in terms of the golden shadow. But, we could say a lot about the golden shadow in terms of admirable qualities for the Magician, because, the Magician is also inherently creative and curious. There's a lot of curiosity coming up today, especially with that Page of Swords. And there's a lot of dedication that exists within the Magician. And so in terms of golden quality or golden shadows, I would challenge you all to spend some time thinking, in what ways am I really curious or resourceful that maybe I don't give myself credit for? All right, so let's pull another card. Another sword, okay. So we're looking at the Seven of Swords. Okay, so this one's definitely a good one, a better challenge, because this card is, it's really difficult to find maybe more of the admirable qualities of this card right off the bat, because this card is so often attributed to sneakiness and dishonesty and trying to get away with something. So how the hell could this represent a golden shadow? But it could. And we like a good challenge. That's literally what I just asked tarot for. I wanted a challenge. So let's look a little deeper at this card. At its core, this is an archetype of strategy, resourcefulness. Oh, there's a theme today, resourcefulness. I've said that about Page of Swords and the Magician as well. And there's also a level of self-assertion here, which maybe I'll get into more in a second. But this person actually looks quite confident that maybe they are taking what they feel rightfully belongs to them. There's a strong assertive quality that exists here. Someone who is unafraid to take what they need or want. So again, this card speaks to not only resourcefulness, but because it's a sword, I also want to say ingenuity. Because the person depicted is finding some sort of solution to a problem, it seems, especially based on the body language and what's going on. Like they had something they needed to fix or get, and they took it upon themselves to do that. So this could involve thinking outside the box or making the best of a difficult situation. Maybe in kind of outside archetypal life, this could translate to, us finding the confidence to be maybe innovative in the way that we're approaching a challenge, either in our relationships or work life. And in terms of a golden shadow aspect of this, embracing this trait is really about resilience and adaptability. So think about times at work when you've been really annoyed with people who speak up with new and innovative ideas. That could be poking at a part of you that doesn't feel like you have the capability to speak up and share your own ideas. So the goal of identifying the golden shadow is so that we can claim or even reclaim the parts of ourself that, again, this goes back to the strengths-based approach I was talking about therapeutically, reclaiming the parts of ourself that actually do function as strengths that maybe we were told are undesirable. And it's our job to go back and look and say, oh, what parts of myself have I repressed because other people did not like that? And a lot of times, we think about how life exists kind of on this cycle. People who are, I don't want to say responsible, but people who are a part of the process of the development of one of our shadows are often, again, like Jung said, projecting their own insecurities and own shadows onto us. So there becomes a cycle where someone sees something in you that maybe pokes at their shadow and they're like, nope, like that's not right. You should hide that. So there becomes this perpetual experience of qualities and characteristics being forced to be hidden. And then a narrative written that those characteristics or traits are not desirable. And in fact, they are. So it's up to us to take a look instead of just taking people's words at face value. What is actually good for us versus what is actually unhealthy for us? And it's in this process that we're really able to start healing some of those parts that maybe we felt were necessary to hide or repress in order to be safe. And when I use the word heal, I want to use that word carefully because I don't mean heal it and, oh, it's great and it's perfect. I'm using heal in terms of acknowledging and then integrating because it's going to be difficult still, even when you acknowledge, oh, I have this shadow or I have this golden shadow. Just because you're able to acknowledge it doesn't mean that suddenly you're able to coexist with it like peacefully or without conflict or discomfort. A lot of times that's not the case. And so it's really about working to notice that it exists, notice when it starts to feel a little sore or maybe insecure. And then we can say, ooh, what's happening here? What do I need to do to accommodate this part or talk to it and let it feel safe again? So this actually, talking about that brings me to this idea of the concept of individuation, which I mentioned Jung spoke extensively about. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you've heard me talk about it too, especially through the lens of the world archetype, because I believe the world archetype is a perfect depiction of individuation. And when we explore both the maybe dark, quote unquote dark shadows, along with the golden shadows, we are giving ourselves an opportunity to step into or at least get closer to that space of individuation. Because at its core, individuation is about wholeness and feeling complete. And wholeness can't be achieved unless we give ourselves permission to explore all facets of our psyche and just our humanness. So before we wrap up this episode, I kind of want to pull a few more cards. I've kind of been in my head while I'm talking about this, thinking about a spread specifically regarding the golden shadow. And so I'm going to just kind of, I guess, workshop it out loud while you all listen and see if it even works. I don't know if it's going to work or make sense, but we will find out together. So I'm thinking 3 cards, and the questions that kind of keep floating around for me are card 1, maybe representing our unacknowledged potential, because that's really kind of the core of the golden shadow. And then card 2, maybe representing an obstacle that prevents us from fully embracing that potential. And then for card 3, I'm kind of thinking, how can we reclaim or integrate this potential / hidden strength back into our life? So yeah, let's pull and see what happens. So for card 1, unacknowledged potential. Oh my gosh, this is the very swordsy episode. It's wild. The Queen of Swords. So, interesting for untapped potential. I love the Queen of Swords. I think this really speaks to everything I've been talking about today. This maybe capacity to clearly articulate what we are thinking or even feeling, and being willing to openly share maybe some of our ideas or solutions to problems that maybe perhaps we haven't built a lot of confidence around. All right, so that represents the unacknowledged potential. So let's pull for the obstacle that prevents us from embracing that potential. Ooh, okay. Ace of Cups. Interesting. Ace of Cups. The barrier preventing us. I almost feel like this is representing, I guess I'm going to kind of look at this maybe in more of a reversal aspect. But I wonder if it's because we are afraid of what we might experience emotionally if we do allow ourselves to speak up and let people see our kind of internal intellectual world. Because with the Queen of Swords, that untapped potential is really kind of what our mind and our brains are capable of. And it takes a lot of vulnerability to be able to share something like that. So the Ace of Cups as an obstacle might be referencing kind of that internal instability that we are battling, all those what if thoughts, really, because, this cup could, even though it's a very positive, loving cup and it's overflowing, it could also be overflowing with all of these anxious thoughts of, well, what if they say this? Or what if my idea is stupid? Or what if people don't understand me? So I think that absolutely makes sense for an obstacle. All right, let's pull for card 3. How can I reclaim or integrate that hidden strength of the Queen of Swords back into our life? Okay. The Emperor. The Emperor. Ooh, okay. So there's a lot of confidence here. Embracing the Emperor is really about embracing structure and discipline. So I wonder if this is about maybe getting really specific about how you might integrate this Queen of Swords energy back into your life. So the Emperor is very calm and strategic and, like I said, structured. So you might want to spend some time thinking, okay, how can I explore this in a way that doesn't feel chaotic? So maybe, for example, if we'll use work, because that's usually an easy example here. Maybe you have a meeting coming up and the emperor would say, choose one meeting that maybe you feel somewhat secure in, and a meeting that feels like pretty structured, and allow yourself to share one idea in that meeting that maybe you wouldn't typically share. So don't go wild and start just word vomiting all over the place because you're trying to embody the Queen of Swords and share all your thoughts, especially if you are trying to really step back into this potential. We want to do it in a way that is safe and attainable and sustainable. So the Emperor is really swooping in to say, be strategic with the way that you're choosing to do this. Because ultimately, you want to create a healthy atmosphere, both internally and externally, where, the emotional experience of this Ace of Cups can kind of work in tandem with the intellectual experience of the Queen of Cups that you are trying to reclaim and integrate back into your life. I loved exploring the Golden Shadow with you, and this was obviously very much just an introductory discussion into this idea, but I would love to hear what you all pulled alongside me. I love getting your emails and seeing if you're listening on Spotify, you're able to send little messages. And I just love getting those. I get so excited when I get an email alert that you all have left a comment for me. It's really cool. Even just hearing what you pulled or commenting on the cards that I pulled, you guys always open my mind to new ways of viewing the cards, and I just greatly appreciate you. Thank you so much for listening to the Tarot Diagnosis. For more tarot and mental health content, follow the Tarot Diagnosis on Instagram. You can also subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and sign up to receive the Tarot Diagnosis emails, where you'll have access to exclusive spreads and exciting announcements. To join an incredible community of tarot and psychology enthusiasts, join the Tarot Diagnosis membership community, The Symposium, by visiting thetarotdiagnosis.com.